Yes.
Good afternoon. I would like to open the public hearing for the draft 2024 Tompkins Countywide Shared Services Initiative, CWSSI plan. If you're interested in speaking on behalf of this public hearing, please approach the microphone. Okay, I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds.
We have one virtual
okay.
speaker for the public hearing.
Thank you, Dominic.
Robert Lynch from the town of Enfield.
Hello, Mr. Lynch. Welcome to the public hearing. Robert, are you there?
Doesn't look like we're getting any audio from his computer. Look seems to be on his end at the moment.
Okay. Hello, Bob. We see you. Is your audio working?
It's possible he can't hear us. Rob, can you do an audio check in the room? Okay, thumbs up from Rob upstairs. Seems to be working. Bob, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Okay.
Yes.
You're our first speaker for a public hearing for the draft 2024 Tompkins Countywide Shared Services Initiative, CWSSI plan. And you could start speaking.
Thank you very much, Chair Black, for inviting me and inviting comment on this. I thought I'd approach these precious 3 minutes I have, not so much as an advocate, but as a reporter who had the good fortune to zoom into the Newfield Town Board last Thursday night when they held a public hearing into this draft shared services initiative. I got to be honest with you, the report did not fare well that night. The hearing lasted for a full 40 minutes. There was town board discussion and public discussion thereafter. It took up a full hour, and that initiative emerged battered and torn after that grilling that your personnel received from people in the town of Newfield. And the key problem is, and I don't know where this came from, but it's that last sentence in the 5th paragraph of the front page narrative. Quote, "The county will need to consider cost sharing or other arrangements with municipalities to support ongoing operational expenses for year 2 and beyond," end quote. And that was what posed a problem. There wasn't a figure given as to what Newfield or Enfield or any other town would have to pay in. And I never heard that there was ever going to be any town municipal pay into this. I'll just give you a flavor with some of the comments that were said at that meeting from the public. This is a duplication of service. Are we going to challenge taxpayers further? Another quote. If we get out of this, does it still figure into the tax bill? Can we opt out of this? And yet another. We already have a vehicle. We have the supplies. What we don't have is salaries. That's a quote. And these were people, I think, largely drawn from the fire department community in Newfield. Newfield Supervisor Michael Allinger mentioned, it's awful hard to move forward without a clue as to what this is going to cost. He said something else. Maybe it would be better to pay local people to staff the town's fire station. Those were the comments there. One council person said, "You haven't sold me." She also said, "I'm not opposed to the idea, but if we're voting on something tonight, I'd vote no." Of course, they didn't vote on anything that night, but it didn't receive one positive comment from the public at that Newfield hearing. And that Newfield hearing will be probably duplicated this coming week in Enfield. Our town board has scheduled a October 11th public hearing on this same shared services plan. You know, one person asked in Newfield, you know, where are we going to get the people when Bang's ambulance is struggling to get people? Are we going to pull them out of the sky, he's asked? You know, these are questions. This is something that has got to be resolved. And as I have said and I have observed, this report, this initiative is not ready for prime time yet. We've got to do further work on it. And I think that with the county sitting on the fund balances that it's sitting on, and with the towns struggling as they are, I think we've got to have a different plan, a county-supported plan, totally county-supported, for this fly car system. And I hope you'll consider that. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on the draft 2024 Tompkins Countywide Shared Services Initiative CWSSI plan?
Madam Chair?
Dan Lamb?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Lamb. I teach public policy at Cornell. A number of my students are here, so I'm going to behave myself. But I also represent the town of Dryden, as many of you know. And I want to thank you for taking on this issue. It's something that I've had my classes study for about 4 studies we've produced, and many of you have read these studies. And I think this effort going forward is a culmination of what we've learned in this process about the need to provide service throughout the county and not have these life-threatening conditions where we have calls for emergency services going unanswered for up to 20 minutes. You want to talk about municipalities struggling, that wait is the struggle that we got to keep in mind. So this effort, I really salute. I support the application. There are some things I'd like you to keep in mind. And the first is the shared, the cost services aspect was a surprise to us. We didn't expect that. I think that needs to be communicated better. In public policy, one of our biggest challenges is communicating. It surprised some folks out in Newfield. I think if we can show them what this means to the municipalities, they'll buy into it more. I mean, the town of Dryden doubled our ambulance tax in 2019, doubled it. Not a single person complained because people want that emergency service. You'll find the same thing here as we roll out this program. The other thing that I really encourage you to keep in mind is to move forward regardless of the outcome of the shared services grant from New York State. Put contingency money in the budget so this thing can go forward. It's that important. When we learned about the shared services grant, I was a big supporter of it. I encouraged us to apply. But let's not make this contingent on whether the state grades this the way we want them to, because we know the state can act in their own manner, unpredictably. I think the county needs to put skin in the game. The municipalities, I think, as we teach them or show what this program can do to their residents, will buy into the program and they'll see the benefits. I also want to thank that the team that we have here with Michael Stitley and Joe Milliman, they're Class A, and they really get this, and I think you got the right people to implement this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Is there anyone else here to speak on behalf of the public hearing for the draft 2024 Tompkins Countywide Shared Services Initiative Plan? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Next, I'm going, whoops, hey. Got carried away. Next, I'm going to open the public hearing for the proposed local law number D of 2023, a local law overriding tax levy limit for 2024. If anyone is interested in speaking on behalf of this public hearing, please stand up and approach the microphone. Wait about 30 more seconds. Okay, I would like to close the public hearing for proposed local law number D of 2023, a local law overriding the tax levy limit for 2024. Now, if you could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. To the flag of the United States of America, and to Thank you. If we could have a roll call of members, please.
Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion.
Here.
Susan Curry.
Here.
Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Rich John.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Here.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar.
Here.
Lee Shirtliff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Travis Brooks. Travis Brooks. Shauna Black.
Here.
13 members present.
Thank you. We have one proclamation this evening, and Brandy Remington is here to accept the proclamation. Whereas bullying has been identified as a prevalent and serious problem affecting today's youth, and whereas types of youth bullying include physical, verbal, and relational bullying, as well as cyberbullying that involves threatening or harassing electronic communications, and whereas 20% of teens nationally report being bullied at school, and 46% of teens nationally report being cyberbullied, and whereas bullying has psychological, physical, and academic effects and adversely affects youth who are bullied as well as those who engage in bullying, and whereas more than 24 government agencies, community organizations, parents, and representatives from the county's 6 school districts formed the Tompkins County Bullying Prevention Task Force in March 2019, and whereas the task force's mission is to facilitate comprehensive cooperation across the community in developing and promoting appropriate bullying prevention and response strategies in Tompkins County, and whereas every member of the Tompkins County community government agencies, community organizations, school administrators, teachers, athletic coaches, parents, and students can play a part in creating a bully-free environment in our schools, athletic fields, public spaces, and online websites. And whereas the task force organizes a series of United in Kindness educational events and activities in October to fight bullying and domestic violence and to promote kindness and empathy throughout our community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Tompkins County Legislature does hereby proclaim the month of October 2023 as United in Kindness Month in Tompkins County. In witness whereof, I, Shauna Black, have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the Great Seal of Tompkins, State of New York, on this 3rd day of October 2023.
Hi, I'm Brandy Remington from TST BOCES, and on behalf of the Tompkins County Bully Prevention Task Force and all of our member organizations, I would like to thank the legislature for proclaiming October as United in Kindness Month here in Tompkins County. October is National Bullying Prevention Month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and includes Digital Citizen Awareness Week. And every time I read that list, my heart feels a little heavy. It brings to the forefront of my mind all the power imbalances and unacceptable behaviors that need to be healed in our community. And it reminds me of the struggles our students, families, and neighbors face, and reminds me of problems and barriers we need to overcome before we can truly have a community where there's justice and dignity for all. But when I begin to feel that heaviness, I dig out this quote by architect and philosopher Buckminster Fuller that is cataloged somewhere in the back of my brain. It says, "You can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And that's why I'm excited by this proclamation declaring it United in Kindness Month, and the Bullying Prevention Task Force is excited to share with you that event series. So there's a QR code in front of all of you so you can see our calendar of events. This series is meant to showcase all the great work taking place and remind us that each of our individual efforts come together to create a culture of acceptance and kindness. With this series, we aim to bring our young people, their families, and every single one of our neighbors together to remind them that there's another way of existing, one in which we are not competing for power, airtime, or likes on social media, and where we let our emotions pass through us before we speak or respond. This is where we value inherent worth of every human being, celebrate diversity, and share our individual bounties of abundance. whether those are physical resources and tools, knowledge and information, or even the simple abundance of joy. Because this is what a community united in kindness looks like. So again, thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you. Next, I would like to make an announcement of executive session. We are going to enter into executive session in accordance with Article 7, Section 105 of the Public Officers Law for the discussion of collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or a corporation, and the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, of the proposed acquisition of securities or sale or exchange of securities held by such public body, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. Now it is time for us to move on to privilege of the floor for our public. If you're here and would like to speak on privilege of the floor, I would encourage you to please fill out one of the blue forms located at the back table, and you can hand it to a legislator and they'll send it up. I would like to remind everyone the rules for speaking under the privilege of the floor. Number 1, I agree to a 3-minute time limit. Number 2, I agree not to raise my voice. Number 3, I agree not to use lewd, obscene, profane, slanderous, or libelous language or speak or act in a manner that would tend to incite a breach of the peace. Number 4, I agree not to speak about county personnel matters. Personnel matters include comments about the job performance of named county employees other than elected officials. Number 5, after 3 minutes, I agree to leave the microphone and yield the floor. Transferring time to another person is not permitted. Number 6, I agree that if I cause a disruption and am asked to leave, I will leave the chambers. Our first speaker tonight is James Smith.
Hi, James Smith, thank you. First, a guy that remembers black and white television is being trained on a video laryngoscope, thanks to you, I think. Thank you, but I'll let you know how it goes. Yesterday, we were really fortunate. A contractor hit a 6-inch gas pipeline and ruptured it in Ithaca. It was roaring like a jet engine. You could hear it blocks away. Chief Covert, thanks to him, the Ithaca Fire Department and the Ithaca Police Department working together, plus mutual aid in the county was notified, really a catastrophe was averted. It could have been multiple lives lost and extensive property damage. They did their duty. Meanwhile, in the same week, City Council legalized camping. They ignored our concerns about safety for first responders, including, we mentioned, machetes. Thursday night, a man was attacked by a machete by a man with a machete not far from the jungle. I don't know if he lived there or not. City Council has not done their duty. I'll be interested to know if you think the city's been a good partner or not in this, and how you think it should proceed going forward. Some of us will be talking tomorrow at City Council. On another matter, Ms. Pillar, from an EMS perspective, you were involved in blocking a road. During a protest, you tried to make a connection to public safety, which I really don't see as an EMT paramedic. You said no emergency vehicles were were there, or you would have let them through. And there's sort of an arrogance in that statement that a mob is going to decide who can use a public road. But my concern from an EMS perspective is we now know rapid response and arrival to the hospital will give us definitive care for stroke and heart attacks. We work on very narrow protocols. So we don't just need to be stopped. Just being slowed down or have to detour can cause significant neurological defect or cardiac damage to a patient by these delays, and you don't know what the delay is or where that magic number is. A lot of people drive themselves to the hospital or to the walk-in clinic because they don't recognize the symptoms, and you don't know who was blocked in that traffic or where they were going. I don't think road blockage is an acceptable form of protest. I don't know why we've been letting it go in Ithaca this long. Certainly you can reconsider your position. I always reconsider my position, especially like when I'm up here public talking. But I don't think, if you would do this again, I don't think it's consistent with your position on the Public Safety Committee. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. I appreciate the support, especially the grant and the equipment that we're getting trained on.
Thank you. Next is Zach Wynn.
Hello, my name is Zach Wynn, and I sent an email earlier today with Google Drive links to recent photographs I took of the green zone in Ithaca behind Walmart and the site of an encampment fire underneath the bridge at 5 Mile Drive and Route 13 on September 7th. The fire on September 7th next to the train tracks underneath the bridge was the result of an attempted cremation of a dog, or what I hope was a dead dog. 2 gas cans are visible in the photographs, as well as pictures of what remained of the dog after the fire was extinguished. The green zone photos show piles of trash made by Department of Public workers, use of power equipment to clean abandoned campsites. These large piles of trash and debris are riddled with used syringes and Narcan, and I'm told by a City of Ithaca official that this debris will not necessarily be treated as medical waste, as it is an issue for Tompkins County Solid Waste to decide. I've previously documented the dumping of jungle waste, including syringes, onto the tipping floor at Tompkins County Solid Waste. The former director explained to me that a certain amount of such debris like this is expected. There are also pictures of what I call the quote bike camp, adorned with swastikas and flying a Confederate flag, with stolen bicycles numbering in the dozens, clearly visible from the new access roads created by the Department of Public Works. Tompkins County Sheriff officer was assaulted in the jungle on September 28th while effecting an arrest. And there was also recently a fire in jungle number 1 that required IPD and IFD assistance to extinguish. And as the weather gets colder, these fires will become more frequent. Councilperson McGonigal has described conditions in the jungle area behind Lowe's and Nate's Floral Estates as being as bad as they have ever been. And this is the area where one of the accused murderers of Thomas Rath made camp. And with the county facing a $1.6 million shortfall in the budget, I suggest funds be redirected from the continuity of care, which is budgeted around $2 million, and use these funds to plug the hole. Organizations funded through the continuity of care are directly enabling the activities in the encampments and fanning the flames of this crisis. I request the legislature ask each COC participant to explain their activities in the jungle and consider visiting the jungle yourselves. I had also previously asked this body and any law enforcement who are participating for your assessment of actually just what's going on in Ithaca. There is the suggestion that it's only a perceived increase of crime and not an actual one. You see this often in local media. So I would like to know just officially, are things getting worse, and what is the totality of circumstances? Each one of these individual incidents is presented as if it is not an interconnected issue. And I personally believe things are getting more and more out of control, and I encourage the legislature to assert control over addressing the situation, because you cannot rely on the City of Ithaca to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Next is Ellen Woods.
Hi. I prepared a statement, so I'm going to read it. I'm going to try and go fast. Esteemed members of the county legislature, today I stand before you to shed light on an essential aspect of our community safety and well-being. Currently, our emergency response system relies heavily on the dedication and commitment of our basic life support EMS volunteer responders and firefighters. And I'm here as the EMS director of Enfield Fire Company. However, there are crucial disparities and challenges within the system that warrant our attention and action. In most fire companies across our county, we typically have between 1 and 3 enthusiastic EMS responders, complemented by firefighters who may assist in various emergency situations, such as motor vehicle accidents, search and rescue, or occasionally cardiac arrests. It is important to note that becoming an EMT or a CFR, Certified First Responder, is a demanding process that requires ongoing commitment and considerable academic skills, whereas technically in New York State, firefighter certifications, while also increasingly academic, do not necessitate regular renewal. Paramedics, EMTs, and CFRs, on the other hand, must recertify every 3 years in New York and every 2 years nationally. This highlights the rigorous, intellectually demanding nature of EMS work. Our fragile safety net can falter at any given moment. Enfield Fire Company has managed to create a schedule for EMS coverage from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., filling it on average 3 to 5 nights a week. However, many other departments struggle to schedule volunteers at all. At any point, one or more of our dedicated responders may be forced out of service due to numerous reasons, including family commitments, first responder trauma, new career opportunities, training commitments, or personal illnesses. This really underscores the thin and vulnerable nature of our safety net, which is marred by rips and tears throughout. Beyond responding to emergency calls, basic life support first response squads in New York State are burdened with many responsibilities. These include maintaining an electronic charting system, training members in charting procedures, ensuring quality assurance, and facilitating training for new recruits, and there's much more. So basically, I'm going to wrap up because I see I only have 32 seconds, but furthermore, it is imperative to provide consistent and reliable first response experiences to the residents of Tompkins County. All citizens of Tompkins County deserve equitable access to 911 services. They deserve to have our BLS first response units offering all BLS treatments allowed under state law, including CPAP and epinephrine check and inject. Whether they reside in Cayuga Heights, downtown Ithaca, or in rural Caroline, our community should have access to an equitable level of emergency response.
Thank you, Ellen. Next is Mark Whitmer.
Hello, everybody. Mark Whitmer, Town Supervisor, Town of Caroline. And I just want to say a few words. I didn't speak at the public hearing because I was on the shared services panel, so that didn't seem right. But I do want to speak about the initiative and how excited I am about it. Emergency response has been an issue it really came to the forefront in Caroline in 2016 when our ambulance service ceased to exist. And, this is a recognized issue across rural parts of the state especially, and it's recognized across Tompkins County. So, in 2020, we initiated a Tompkins County Council of Governments subcommittee to work on this issue, and myself and Rorden Hart and Dan Lamb and the great folks at the Department of Emergency Response have been meeting since then, and with the determination to move forward and implement an effective solution for our residents. And I'm really, I really want to say that I appreciate the legislature's engagement and responsiveness on this issue in the past and now. I think it's clear that everybody recognizes how important this is. So, we had a proposal, the one that you're going to hear about today, from Mike Steitley, and then the opportunity to present this for funding in 2024 as a shared services project came forward, and we thought that was a great idea. So, that's why this proposal is being put forward for state support for next year. So anyway, I'm going to end there and just say I really appreciate the work of the Department of Emergency Response and the committee and the legislature and engagement on this important issue, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else here to speak on privilege of the floor tonight? Okay. We are going to move to municipal officials, and I know we have quite a few of you in the room. Mark and Dan and George, you all are welcome to go for round two if you'd like. Give us an update on your municipality. Yeah, go for it.
Microphone. It's hard for a politician to turn down. As you may have heard, Assemblywoman Kellis made an announcement at the Town of Dryden Hall yesterday, and she had legislation signed by the governor that directly impacts the Dryden broadband project. It's a law now that will allow us to use bond money to cross municipal boundaries. So if we were to go into, say, the village of Dryden or the town of Caroline, some people are talking about that, we now have the state authorization to do so with bond money. So kind of a big deal for Dryden Fiber. Dryden Fiber is growing out. We have paying customers now. I want you all to be aware of that. And places in near Etna and Freeville and the Village. We have an active website. And we're pretty excited about this being the first municipally owned and operated broadband system in New York State. So we're happy about that. You folks have forwarded a broadband access plan, which I think has really good intentions to reach these far out places that aren't getting service. I just ask that as you review that application, or the responses to that RFP, you keep in mind that we have an existing system, municipal system, in operation now in the town of Dryden, and it's growing. And it would be kind of tragic if somehow we were competing against another entity that the county selected through that process. I hope that as we negotiate the RFPs, the responses, that we come up with a solution that is cooperative in nature with whoever you select to serve the county. Dryden Broadband, we can grow outside of the town, but right now we're focused on the town. But we'd like to partner at least with whomever comes in, whomever you select, and not compete. And just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Mark Whitmer.
Thank you, and that's great news about that legislation, Dan, though. Super. I guess I'll just say a word that some of you may know that the town of Caroline is working on a zoning plan, and that's
Good luck with that.
That's been going on for a while. Caroline presently doesn't have zoning, and so any town in New York State adopting zoning for the first time has to go through a process that involves formation of a zoning commission that considers the plan with public input. So we did do that, and we had a wonderful zoning commission that worked for a little more than 2 years, very diligently and with a lot of public engagement. They passed that plan on to us last spring in late March. The town board is now, our responsibility is to review what they gave us, and then when we're satisfied with it, the zoning commission had to hold a public hearing before they adopted it, and we will too. So the town board is reviewing that. I know people ask, why is this taking so long? It just takes time. It just does. So we are making good progress in reviewing that, and I expect us to finish our work fairly soon and move forward to consider zoning in Caroline. So.
Great, thank you. I actually forgot to see if the legislators had questions. Mark, do you mind entertaining some questions if our legislators?
I don't mind entertaining questions.
Any questions for Mark? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Dan Lamb or comments? Okay, Dan Klein.
Dan, certainly not right now. I can't look at you, by the way, and talk into the microphone. I don't mean disrespect. Certainly not now, but I listened carefully to your comments about not competing, and that's completely understandable and makes sense. We're going to need to know more about your plan in terms of the scheduled build out and when you think you can reach all the unserved addresses in Dryden, because that's what the request for proposals is seeking. Is that information you'll be able to provide in the near future?
Yeah, we have a 5-year build-out plan. That's been something that's been guiding us since 2019. And this project is now funded with grant money, but also bond money. And that the money won't be a problem now, thanks to the work of Anna Kellis and others in the legislature. So we can do this work. We're applying for more funding through USDA Reconnect. And whomever gets your RFP approval will probably be applying for that too. So that's another reason why we really need to cooperate and not compete. But our plan, we have residents that are calling us all the time and saying, when are you doing my house? I'm one of them. I call myself, no, but I don't have high-speed internet where I live, and I teach night courses. Sometimes those courses get disrupted for no good reason. Maybe some birds fly by and disrupt my air signal that I get from Mount Pleasant. So yes, we have a 5-year aggressive plan to roll out the program.
5 years from now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg Mezzi has a question for you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I mean, I could just call you, but I figured I'd let you know, too. One of the things I'd like to do is invite Dryden Fiber to the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting to give kind of an update on where Dryden Fiber is, what Dryden Fiber means, and what it means to be a municipally run, service provider, or however the right terminology is.
Owned and operated.
So the next meeting is November 1st. I'll send you a follow-up email, but just wanted to get it out there to get that on your radar.
We'd be honored, and thanks for extending that.
Okay, yeah, I think it'd be good for everybody to kind of to learn from your model and sort of get that out there and get more people aware of how things work.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan Lamb? Rich John?
Actually, this is for Mark Whitmer. I just wanted to say, years ago, I worked with the town of Lansing when they went through putting in zoning. And it was really contentious, but not quite what you're going through. And I wanted to say thank you. I'm completely agnostic as to whether you should have zoning or not, but as a public service and going through the process, that's appreciated.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. And I just, people say, the signs actually say that, they say, no zoning in Caroline, or Caroline zone free forever. But the reason that we had a zoning commission, if zoning was one thing and you could pull it out of a box, we would have done it, a while back. So, my hope and our goal as a municipal board is to have a zoning plan that's appropriate for Caroline. And I'm really pretty happy with what we have. We had a professional planner. We put out a bid and interviewed planners. We had a professional planner who helped us with it. She is an expert in ag and farmland planning. She's done a lot of planning, comprehensive plan planning and zoning planning for towns in rural New York. So I think we had a really good ally in the planner we chose. And so anyway, thank you so much for your thoughts. And I want this to be something that's really good for Caroline. So, but it is true that some people just, think any zoning is bad, so.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next is George McGonigal from the City of Ithaca. To know you is to love you, George.
Good evening, everyone. I'm George McGonigal. I represent the City of Ithaca, First Ward. Here's my news. Common Council is about to begin budget deliberations tomorrow for the 2024 budget. Also, we are working to fill several leadership positions in the city. The primary one being that of city manager, which is a new position. We'll be voting on the job description tomorrow at that Common Council meeting, and the search is already going on. In addition to the city manager, we're also looking for a new police chief. That search has begun. City controller. Our city controller's been there forever. He's fabulous, but He's about to retire. He's actually stayed on longer than he had planned. So we're looking for a new city controller. Youth Bureau, another great leader, is retiring, and the search has already begun. And also a new human resources director, because Shelley's going to retire at the end of the year. The third thing we're working on currently is the Cornell Memorandum of Understanding. The current 20-year memorandum has expired, so we need a new one. The proposal as it stands is for Cornell to pay $4 million a year. It would be much less encumbered than under the previous agreement, and it would raise annually according to inflation. And there are some other things, some help from Cornell staff to the tune of $100,000 a year, and some other things that are thrown in. And that will be voted on October 11th. And you've probably seen a lot in the news that it's fairly controversial. There it is. And,
Okay.
And of course, if we don't agree to this, which is a voluntary payment, there's no guarantee that the city will receive anything for 2024 or in the future. Fourth thing I'd like to mention is our pilot policy to manage homeless encampments on city property. That was passed 8-0 on September 15th. I sent you copies of that resolution and some background today, and I apologize for how late it was. It was, not surprisingly, my mistake. I misspelled your very good Katrina McCloy's name on the email, so it didn't get to you as soon as it should have. I have paper copies with me if you want to look at a paper copy, and they include the map of what's considered the green zone, the area on city property where camping would be allowed. As you probably know, camping is illegal on all city property, even though that has not been enforced. But in this area, this large area behind Walmart, it will be allowed. And access has been improved to the entire several acre parcel. And the hope is that people will be attracted to that area because we're going to be hopefully providing a number of services and better hygiene, et cetera, et cetera. And so obviously we're going to need county cooperation with that. And we are really encouraged by the fact that Tammy Baker has been hired by you guys and is starting a group to work on moving this forward. And I would just like to say to Mr. Smith, I really admire the work you do, and I really admire the fact that you come to Common Council meetings and talk about what's happening in the jungle. I disagree with you that council doesn't care and doesn't care about safety. It's simply not true. And Zach, I admire the way you keep tabs on things. I don't recall saying that things in the jungle are worse now than they've ever been. I don't remember saying that. Okay, that's all I've got. No questions?
Thank you, George. Mike Sigler and then Mike Lane.
Are things in the jungle worse now than they've ever been?
Mike, can you speak into your mic?
Are things in the jungle worse now than they've ever been?
They're not good. I can't say definitively, but they're bad. And somebody was kidnapped and murdered recently. And there have been serious physical attacks with serious injuries and drug overdoses. So, yeah.
Mike Lane?
Hi, George. Two villages in the county are pursuing the DRI grants for the smaller amounts of money, Dryden and Groton. Is the city going to try again for the 10 million?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that right?
Pretty sure.
My understanding is that they were not going to go after any funds this year.
Well, you talk to the higher-ups more than I do, but I thought we were. I can find that out, Mike.
It was our understanding that due to all of the turnover in staffing or the transition that the city is in, that they wanted to wait a year and be able to regroup and submit a more competitive application in the coming year, rather than try again this year.
I stand corrected.
Rich John?
Thanks for coming, George. I read in the paper that the city is considering adding a head count in the police department as a data analyst. And I read the full story, and it said this person would be kind of working in the same space as the data analysts the city and the county hired for the Community Justice Center. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on whether this is redundant. Does this position really need to be there? Or, I would think consolidating this data collection in one person might be a better course. But do you know what the reasoning is?
I know the chief of police wants this position very badly, and I trust his judgment.
Okay.
Randy Brown?
Hello, George.
Randy.
Good news for the MOU in Cornell. Could you refresh my memory on what Cornell is currently contributing and how long do you think this MOU will be for?
Good questions. The current MOU was for the past 20 years. I think it began at under $1 million, just under $1 million. And in 2023, it was up to 1.6 million. And it was encumbered, I can't remember if it's 40% or 60% of it was earmarked for the fire department alone. In the new agreement, if council passes it, it would be for $4 million to start, which is 2.5 times what we're getting now. Remember, this is voluntary contribution. And 80% of it would be up to the city's discretion about how it was spent. And 20% of it would hopefully be agreed upon between the city and Cornell for a project that is mutually beneficial to the city and Cornell. Quite probably public works projects near the campus. But Cornell would not have veto power over how that money would be spent. So there's much more freedom for the city on how to spend this money. And like the previous one, it would increase incrementally with inflation, assuming inflation goes up. It's also another very controversial part of this is that it is pegged for another 20 years. And a lot of people think it should be shorter than that. Cornell is strongly in favor of keeping it 20 years. Some people of the city staff actually have argued that a longer duration of time makes it easier to obtain borrowed money for large projects that are going to take a number of years. I don't pretend to understand how that works, but again, city staff does. So the long duration of the MOU is problematic to a lot of us, but some people think it's not a bad thing.
I have Veronica Pillar, Mike Sigler, and Lee Shurtleff.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy, for teeing up my question. About the MOU, I know that, like you said, people are concerned about the 20-year length, and also that $4 million is really a pittance compared to like Cornell's. I know it's bigger than what they were contributing, but like compared to their budget overall and their the countless effects on the city and causing it to struggle. But I don't envy your position with essentially the budget held hostage by Cornell in that you have to pass a budget now and they're saying 20 years or nothing. But I've heard people talk about potentially asking for a stopgap measure. Like, would they make one more contribution so that this discussion could be over a longer period of time and not, with the stress of a 1.6 million hole in the budget looming over you all. Is that something that you've been discussing or you think you would discuss at a future meeting?
I'm not on the bargaining unit. It's my understanding that the bargaining unit, which is a good bargaining unit, has agreed with Cornell that this is what we've got. And I don't think Cornell's interested in reopening it for a year. Whether we could force them to do that, I don't know. It's absolutely true that I'm sure Cornell could afford to pay more. But it's a voluntary contribution. And if we take our dollars and dishes and go home, then we're losing out on $4 million a year. And one thing that they have offered is this 2024, or this last payment was 1.6. They've offered to add 2.4 million to that to bring that up to $4 million, which we could use in this year's budget.
But contingent on signing the agreement?
Yes. Yep.
It would sound a lot more good faith if they would just offer it, but that's your business.
Okay, Mike Sigler?
I'm sorry, George, I don't know if you know the answer to this. We heard a lot about with the recruitment when it was happening for police officers, on how many passed the test, and it was a good number. I didn't know where we were when it came to, do we have people in the academy? I haven't seen any news reports on any of that. So.
That's an excellent question, and I can answer that. The acting chief Schwartz is really encouraged by the fact that there were a lot more candidates taking the test this last time than there has been in recent years. And we just, one officer just left the local training he does after the academy, so he's on the street now. And we've got one in the academy who's about to graduate, and then he'll do his field training. I know that's just two, but we're getting a lot more interest from what they call lateral applications, people who are police officers now in other municipalities who are applying to come to Ithaca. So We've got a huge hole to make up. I think there's maybe 15 vacancies. But it looks a lot brighter than it did a year ago, or even 6 months ago.
And next is Lee Shirtliff.
Just a quick question for you, George. You mentioned the previous agreement and the dedication of funds toward fire protection. Will a loosening of the restrictions pose any vulnerabilities toward continued funding of the fire service, fire protection in the city?
I don't think so, but there's one potential hiccup that I can see, which is the town of Ithaca pays 30% or about a third of our, to support our fire department, and they also received 30 to 33% of that credit from Cornell, and that'll go away. So town of Ithaca and the city probably going to have to do some negotiating to see how that proceeds. But I don't think, I mean, we can use it. We could use the 20% that's encumbered by Cornell. We could use that money for fire protection, theoretically. So I don't think it's going to put the fire department in jeopardy.
Thanks. That's something for us to keep in mind as we contemplate some of the proposals that are out there on public safety moving forward.
Thank you. Any other questions for George McGonigal? Okay. Thank you, George.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Next in our agenda is legislator privilege of the floor. Mike Lane.
I want to be upbeat tonight. I'm pretty proud to be a New Yorker. This past weekend was fabulous in Tompkins County. The weather was wonderful. In the village of Freeville, they had a dedication of their station park and the new historic marker that was donated by the William Pomeroy Foundation. That park has been built with grant funding, including a tourism grant from Tompkins County, including a grant from our parks, minor parks. Mike Ziegler's was the one who suggested those park grants, I remember. It was fabulous. And if anybody hasn't gone over to see that, it's right on Route 38 at the corner of Factory Street. It's fabulous. It celebrates the history of the railroads, and Freeville being a railroad hub. In Dryden, on Saturday, they had the Homestead Heritage Fair, which is always a terrific event. Draws a lot of people, a lot of music, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of exhibits. I think there was an apple harvest festival in downtown Ithaca. Wow. Those kinds of things make where we live a wonderful place. We hear too often, especially from the young people lately, oh, I don't want to live here. I want to live where it's warmer. I want to go to Florida. I want to go to North Carolina. I want to go somewhere, but don't want to be where there's snow. Well, just tell them that the snow keeps the fire ants, the termites, the poison snakes, and the alligators down there. I could not have been any prouder to be a New Yorker than I was last night at 10:45 p.m. when I heard Governor Hochul's press conference regarding the young girl who had been, as it turned out, kidnapped on her bicycle ride around the lake at a state park. We all held our breaths about when we learned about that. The governor put together a law enforcement operation second to none. It was state police. It was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It was the New York State DEC officers. It was city and local people. They did good, honest police work. And the upshot was, and let's mention the crime labs too. They were a big part of this. The upshot was they found a fingerprint on the ransom note. They traced it back, and they found the perpetrator. They went to his house. The SWAT teams went in very quickly, arrested him, and took the and found and rescued the young girl. Wow. You don't see something like that happen too often. This is what our law enforcement people do so well when they have a crisis. And sometimes we don't appreciate them enough. But I certainly appreciate what they did. I appreciate Governor Hochul's actions and what turned out to be a great result. It could have been so much different. But I'm very proud to be a New Yorker.
Thank you, Mike. Next is Amanda Champion.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank our facilities department. The public library is open again today after a couple of weeks of being closed, and our facilities department did a great job following the timeline and getting things done on time and getting things upgraded at the library. So thank you to them. And just a reminder that the Friends of the Library book sale starts on Saturday for 3 long weekends, and it's my favorite time of the year.
Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else for a legislator privilege of the floor? Okay. Quiet bunch tonight. Next is the chair's report, and I actually do not have a report this evening. I know we're going to have 2 pretty long presentations. So we'll start moving on to the first presentation, and I would like to invite Michael Steitley to... Oh, I also want to, before I do that, make an announcement that we are going to remove from the agenda expanding broadband access plan presentation. That is not ready for showtime yet. Probably will be over the next few months, but it's not ready tonight. So if we could have Michael Steitley and his team join us at the table. Tonight we have Michael Steitley, Jessica Furvis, and Joe Milliman. And they are here to talk. I know that we have written down fly car system. However, we should be calling it the EMS Rapid Medical Response. Welcome.
Hello, how are you? Thank you very much. Joe and I are really excited to have the opportunity to have a conversation with you about what we hope is a solution to help augment and support our community-based fire services that are offering medical first response to their communities. We've had an opportunity to work with some great community partners, and at the end we'll have a slide that will list all the stakeholders that served on an EMS steering committee for nearly the past year. So this was done in partnership with many community partners, and we're really, again, excited and grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you tonight. So, Joe?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I wanted to thank everybody for your time, and I think a few of you have seen parts of our presentation, but let's give it a go. Yeah. Sorry. So we are again, like was mentioned, we're steering away from calling it a flight car system, and we're presenting it as a rapid medical response team, and we're presenting this as a pilot program. So just a quick evolution of the history of EMS throughout Tompkins County that really kind of shows where where our need is and where we're heading. It really starts in the year 1991 when Lansing Ambulance closed their doors and reverted to just a volunteer rescue. Shortly afterwards, Dryden Ambulance Incorporated was formed and they broke away from the fire department. In the mid-90s, Groton Ambulance started paying their paramedics. Right around the year 2000, Trumansburg started paying their paramedics. In the year 2016, we went to what's called determinate dispatch, which will kind of go over what that means. Shortly after that, Slaterville Ambulance closed their doors. Today, Speedsville Rescue is still in service. However, they don't have any certified EMS providers to operate that rescue. So really, we're looking at what comes next. Where are we heading based off of this trend? So the scatter plot is from the year 2022. It is every EMS call within Tompkins County to kind of give you a quick view of where each of our EMS calls are located. It is divided up by township, the blue being Bangs Ambulance, or excuse me, not township, by transport ambulance. So the blue is Bangs Ambulance, the red is Dryden Ambulance, yellow is Groton Ambulance, and the green is Trumansburg EMS. So we have a very wide variety across the entire county of EMS calls. EMS dispatch codes, or EMD codes, is primarily how our ambulances and first responders are dispatched. It gives a priority to the call, so we have a basic understanding based off of what the caller gives the call taker, the severity of the call. So an omega level call is really public assist. There is no need for medical. They just need some sort of assistance. Alpha being the lowest level of medical call, usually sick and injured. A BLS, or basic life support, is really all that's needed. Moving up from there, we go into the Bravo calls, which usually consists of an individual who's fallen, maybe have some bleeding, struck in their head, something that kind of brings up the emergent level a little bit. Charlie level calls are generally your shortness of breath, your chest pains, your stroke calls. Anything that is a Delta call is usually involves some kind of altered mental status, changing in breathing, and echo is really your ineffective breathing. Those are your most life-threatening calls.
And if we could just pause for a second. So this is the code that the 911 dispatcher gives to the EMS agency when they dispatch the call. So what they'll do is they'll use this code in conjunction with a number, and then the EMS agency knows the severity of the incident that they're responding to. Thank you, Joe.
So this chart is year-to-date through the end of August. It does not include September's numbers as of yet. That will be updated, but it shows you how many calls for service each individual rescue has received, how many of those went unanswered, and it also shows you which types of calls they go on. We talked about earlier in 2016, we went to what's called the determinate dispatching, and that's what this is. So some agencies have determined that they don't want to go on lower level calls because they don't have the staff or resources in order to do that. So using Brooktondale being the first on the list as an example, they have been dispatched to 71 Delta and Echo calls, and 29 of those have gone unanswered. So we have several agencies within our county that have missed greater than 1/3 of their EMS calls that they're dispatched to, and that does not include the EMS calls that they don't get dispatched to, and the ambulance is the first to arrive on scene. Last year's number was roughly around 45% total EMS calls that did not receive some sort of a first responder prior to the ambulance. Between 2018 and 2022, we saw an increase in over 1,600 EMS calls. In roughly that same time period, we also saw an increase in the response times of those rescues. Agencies like Enfield and Newfield have greater than 8-minute increase in time. So that's not an 8-minute response time, that's an increase in 8 minutes from 2017 to 2021. The national average is about 4 minutes. The agencies that are excluded from this list are those that don't have a rescue. So that includes Groton Fire Department, Dryden Fire Department, Slaterville Fire Department, and Speedsville. Although they have a rescue, they don't have staff, so they're not included on that list as well. So looking at that data, what does it really mean? It just means there it goes, that we're seeing less of an EMS response, which means we're seeing longer wait times for those patients that have called 911. If that goes uncorrected, those longer wait times are going to lead to decreased survival rates. In emergency medicine, time is money. So looking across New York State, there are several counties that already have some sort of a county-wide EMS program. Each one is slightly different, built to their personal needs. Chautauqua County has both fly cars and ambulances. Erie County has 5 ambulances as well as several fly cars. Shenango County has 2 ALS fly cars and just recently switched to an ambulance model as well during the day. Schuyler County has 4 ambulances. Otsego County utilizes ambulances to back up their community-based services when they're not available. Essex County, Wayne County, Steuben County, and Genesee County all also have some sort of a program. Steuben and Genesee County have contracted with private commercial agencies to come in and provide their EMS service for them. Counties that are currently in the same situation that we're at whether some sort of a discussion or development of an EMS program include Niagara County and Warren County, and each of them are still in the planning phase. So here in Tompkins County, we met with the EMS steering committee from TCOG, and they were able to identify where there's a need in order to fill a gap of the lack of or increase in response time for our community-based rescues. So we developed a plan called the Rapid Medical Response. It's a team of first responders that are going to assist the timely response of medical emergencies throughout our county. They'll be fully trained EMS providers at the basic life support level. They will arrive on scene, initiate life-saving care, stabilize the patient, and wait with the patient for the transport agency to arrive. Or in certain situations, when they're not needed, they can cancel the transport agency and leave them in service to answer higher level calls. What this is not is we're not going to be a transport agency. We will not have ambulances, and we're not here to replace the community-based rescues. We're here to supplement and augment their current system. You all have a handout that has our slides, and on the very front page is this exact letter. It is signed by Deputy Chief Kelvin Carr from the McLean Fire Department. He is the president of the Tompkins County, New York State Fire Chiefs Association. He is also on the call as well with us today for support. Basically, the Fire Chiefs Association that meets unanimously voted in favor of a medical response, a rapid medical response team. The 2 diagrams that we have included are ideal responses. So using the idea of having 3 vehicles, they would be placed in 3 strategically locations throughout the county that give them the diagram on the left is a 15-mile radius from that location, and the diagram on the right is the county roads that give them about a 15-minute drive time from that location. So using these, you can see that the majority of Tompkins County would be covered by these rapid medical response vehicles. For staffing, we're looking at approximately 9 employees. Each rescue would require a full-time, a part-time, and a per diem EMT. Evenings, weekends, nights would be covered by the home agency, the community-based rescue. And during the daytime, which we've identified as the greatest need for assistance, is where we would step in and assist them when they need it. So this is a breakdown of the first year startup costs of the program. The annual cost per response unit, and then the total cost, which would be all 3 units combined. You can see that some of the costs are the same because it would be one cost regardless of how many vehicles we have. Others, such as fuel, maintenance, and that kind of supplies would be multiplied by 3 because one, it's the cost per unit, and we're looking at possibly 3 units. This would be our reoccurring costs. This is what we're looking at for approximate costs for each year following our startup. Currently, the counties that already have a program in place have some sort of a cost-sharing model. Some counties are splitting that cost with their municipalities, whether it's 50-50 or some sort of a percentage. Some counties are covering that cost in full. Some counties have started covering the cost in full and are transitioning to a hospital-based EMS system in which the hospital would assume that cost. And some counties are contracting with private EMS agencies to cover the EMS needs, and we're not really sure who's actually assuming that cost. So we came up with a couple of cost-sharing models. In this model, or these 5 models are, each one we understand has some sort of a flaw. They're not perfect. It's really just to kind of get the discussion going of where we could look at some cost-sharing initiatives. So model 1, we looked at splitting it 50-50. So the county would take on 50% of that first year cost, and the 9 municipalities that we've identified as using our services, which are Caroline, Danby, Dryden, Enfield, Groton, Lansing, Newfield, Ulysses, and the town of Ithaca, would each split that cost. You will note that we did exclude the city of Ithaca because they currently have a paid rescue service. For model 2, we're looking at taking the current community-based rescues that are utilized that we are looking to help supplement and dividing the cost per each of those rescues. So the town of Caroline currently has what should be 3 rescues, whether they're in service or not. So that's where we came up with 3 for them. The town of Danby has 2. The McLean Fire Department is shared by both the town of Dryden and the town of Groton, which is where we get the 0.5 in our number there. Model 3, we are looking at excluding the townships that have a transport agency and sharing the cost equally 50% with the rest of those townships. For Model 4, we're looking at a 75-25% split where the county assumes 75% of the cost and the municipalities, those 9, would share the other 25%. And Model 5 would be the Tompkins County would assume this at 100%. So I guess we're going to kind of go over a quick overview of I guess how the dispatch or how the day-to-day operations would work. So a caller would call 911 with what they presume to be a medical emergency, and what would happen at the 911 center is they would dispatch the ambulance, they would dispatch the community-based rescue, as well as our rapid medical response. Should that rescue be able to have enough crew and get out the door, the hopes is that the rapid medical response would return in service so they are available for the next emergency. If they're not able to get out the door, then the hope is that the rapid medical response would respond to the scene. The goal for a rescue or for a rapid medical response is to arrive on scene prior to the ambulance, begin initial life-saving treatment, and then transfer the patient to the ambulance. Should they arrive on scene and it's a low-level call and there actually is no transport needed, they could obtain that refusal and turn that ambulance to the next emergency and keeping them in service for the next high-level call. Mike, anything you want to add?
I appreciate, nice job on the presentation. And this is the steering committee. We just lost the slide, but that was our steering committee. So I think, just to maybe discuss, how do we get here? How do we start this conversation? It initially started well before me and well before Joe. And I said before to this group that, sometimes, we're in my role, just a steward of ideas that have started before. So, this really does go back to 2016. And, there was a lot of community members that worked really hard to try to figure out a solution. When Joe and I were asked to join the TCOG EMS subcommittee to really engage in this conversation, we were then asked if we could come up with a model that we thought might help while also supporting the community-based services. So I really do want to emphasize that, none of the data that we're showing today is in any way, shape, or form to disparage our community-based services, but it certainly emphasizes that there's a need to help them. And I do truly believe that a program like that will help to decompress some of the responsibilities they have, especially during the day. What we're anticipating is that this would be during the day where the bulk of the calls are for EMS. And there's also less volunteers available. So we're looking at a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. model. However, we would like that to remain fluid. In addition to where we're placing the units, we'd also like that to remain fluid, because we might find that as the calls are starting to come in, that we might need to place those units somewhere else than what we've noted on the map. So we really do need an opportunity to really evaluate this as it's unfolding and to be able to make adjustments based on the data. So I just thought that would be maybe just a good opportunity again to just sort of let you know how we got here today and why we're here presenting this program, and look forward to the questions and the engagement.
Great, thank you so much. It's hard to believe that just a year ago we were having a conversation about adding the EMS coordinator, and to look at the work that you've done over the past year is absolutely incredible. So kudos to your team, and also thank you to the steering committee, all the people listed, for putting in the time and effort to come up with these great options. I mean, we're going to have some really hard decisions this year in our budget, but I'm really happy with this option. So thank you. Any questions or comments? Mike Ziegler, Dan Klein, Mike Lane, Ann Corman, Rich John.
Okay, I have two questions. So this response would basically be for Charlie, Deltas, and Echoes then. I mean, would you go lower?
We would go lower. Yeah, that's a really great question. So what we're envisioning is being dispatched to all calls. So even those calls where the community-based services struggled and, by policy or by protocol don't respond to typically the Alpha and the Bravo. So this unit would respond to all those calls. And the reason why we want to do that is because sometimes when the call comes into dispatch, even though we might code it as an Alpha call, it might turn out to be something more serious. So if a patient does transition, it would be really wise for them to have that. And the other part of this is really just good customer service. When a person calls 911, to have somebody arrive at their home that, even though we might as emergency responders look at as maybe a lower level call, in their moment of crisis, it might be the worst thing they've ever experienced, regardless of how we code it in the 911 center.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, under the different funding models that you had put up, is the working theory, I'm just going to pick out Ithaca because it gets the most calls, is the working theory that bangs will get there so quickly that we'll be able to call off the rapid response and we can utilize the rapid response someplace else?
I think the important takeaway regarding Ithaca City is the fact that the Ithaca Fire Department does provide rescue services for that jurisdiction, so they're typically able to get there very quickly. So just putting bangs aside for a moment, which obviously I think in most instances also can get there very quickly, when it comes to the city, they're already providing for the city what we're sort of, pitching to do for the county.
Dan Klein.
Pick someplace else. Okay, it's fine.
Thank you. I had a question, then maybe a couple of quick comments. You called it a 2-year pilot there. Is that, I had thought it was a 3 year. Is it 2 year as in the startup year and then 1 year after, or is it startup and then 2 more years?
Correct, the startup year and then the year after, and then to take a look at our data and reanalyze where we're at and if it's working or if it needs adjustment.
2 years total. Good. Yeah, I want to make a couple of quick comments. I know we're going to have a lot of time for a debate about this later, but I just want to say that anybody that's been involved in local government and local community work knows about this problem. It's a nationwide problem. We all know it. Everybody knows it. And a lot of people spent a lot of time trying to crack this code. There was, among other things, there was this 2-year task force that I was on, and Lee was on, and Lisa was on, and I'm not sure, maybe some others here. And, we received all this data, we talked about it, but in the end, we really didn't come up with anything. Nobody's really come up with anything. And so I am so excited that somebody's finally come up with something that can work, that can probably make a dent in this, a serious dent in this problem. It doesn't cost a fortune, it doesn't cost nothing, it's not nothing, but it doesn't cost a fortune. $500,000 a year is not a huge price tag for this kind of thing. And that, I know there's some consternation being expressed about the cost and if this can really work. And I really am hoping we can take a little bit of a leap of faith in this, because there is no plan B. Nobody has another good idea to start trying if this one doesn't work. So I really hope that we can do our best to get behind this to the extent that we can, take the little bit of leap of faith, and of course ask hard questions and work out all the details. There's a lot of details to be worked out, but I really hope that we can see this 2-year pilot to fruition. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Next is Mike Lane.
Thanks for this presentation. It was very good. Maybe I missed it, but where would the 3 cars be located? Do we have to rent space for them in a garage? And do we have facilities for the employees at those spaces?
So we are looking at 3 strategically located areas in the county. The one unit we anticipate could run right out of the door because that would be what we refer to as our Lansing unit. We are not beginning, but we've had several conversations with some community partners about whether or not they'd be willing to host us. We're continuing to have those conversations, in part because I think some of them were waiting for us to have this moment now to see, how serious of a conversation we can have. But I'm pretty optimistic that we'll be able to identify some community partners that hopefully will be able to host one of our units.
So perhaps in a fire station, for example?
Yeah, perhaps a fire station, exactly.
Okay, I have Rich, John, Ann Corman, Greg Muzzy.
Thank you for the presentation, and I share Dan's excitement that this seems to be something we're really close to being able to get to a solution. I represent a city district, and the ambulance service inside the city is pretty good, but I look at this as a one-county issue, that we need to make sure our ambulance service as a whole and our emergency medical service as a whole serves everybody in the county, and the city will benefit as a result of that in some measure. But it's not a crisis here in the city, but it matters to the city too, in my view. What I wanted to say was this reminds me of forming water districts in towns, which I spent some time doing, and among all the other work, you have to make 2 legal representations. You have to say everybody in the district is benefited, and you do not have people that are benefited that are not in the district. So you don't have free riders, and you make sure that everybody who's paying gets something out of it. Looking at the cost models, the one you put up that showed there was some consideration for the municipalities that already have ambulance service functioning, Dryden, Groton, Trumansburg, makes sense to me, because you do not want to diminish any of their service. You don't want to create any incentive for them to not maintain the current level of service. And then on the other side, the city really isn't going to see significant changes in their response times. So it makes sense to me to exclude them because they're not benefiting necessarily, although they would pay out of their county tax share, so they would be contributing, but not to the same extent. And then the town's paying a share where they get a direct benefit to looking at those response times and seeing them drastically improve. I think that is something that we need to test with the residents in those towns. I certainly heard the comments from some people at the beginning of our meeting saying that the town shouldn't pay anything, but frankly, this is where the benefit will be received, and it will save lives in those communities. I believe having a reasonable cost share is absolutely reasonable and vital to make this whole thing work financially. How that, the devil's in the details, but that's where I think we need to get, and we can do it in 2024, which is, as Dan said, the exciting part. Thank you.
So for time's sake, I would urge all of us to stick with the actual presentation, because my assumption is that we're going to see an amendment on our budget that's probably going to include one of these options, and we're going to end up rehashing this whole conversation for 3 or 4 more hours. So if we could keep it based on the presentation and not dig so deep into options, I think we'd all go a little bit faster tonight. And I'm sure that we will have a very robust conversation for all of this in the near future. Ann Corman?
So, Shauna, I had a question about the options. from the
I think that's fine.
presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, so can I ask, all right. Thank you for the presentation and all the work on this. So, question for the options regarding, for instance, so on, it's the cost sharing in Tompkins County. On ours, it's packet page, or it's page 10. So just questioning, like the rationale for Enfield and for the town of Ulysses, why they're included in some and not in others. I know Ulysses contracts with Trumansburg Fire and Rescue, and Enfield has their own fire and rescue. So just wondering about that for costs.
So we just kind of played around with some of the different townships. So all of the townships excluding the city of Ithaca were included in, like Model 1. For Model 3, we took out the ones that have a transport ambulance in them. And then for Model 2, we took the ones that have their own rescue service. So not necessarily that they have a fire department, or not necessarily that they have a transport unit, but that they have a rescue.
That was for number 2?
Correct.
And honestly, we struggled with these suggestions in part because even towns that have services may eventually benefit from this. So, a town that has a transport unit, if all their units are out, which, believe it or not, happens quite often. In fact, we've been working with our EMS transport partners on strategies to help cover gaps in the county because we have so few transport agencies when one agency has been maxed out. So, as Joe said in the beginning, we understand that some of this might be flawed, but we were just trying to come up with different examples. But I just think it's really important for everybody to realize that we're anticipating that even those towns that might even have a transport unit might at some point in time need this service. And just because of how mutual aid works in public safety, that we very may likely have to send this unit into one of those towns if their resources have been depleted.
So for Model 2, including Enfield, even though they have a fire rescue, but you don't include the town of Ulysses?
So the town of Ulysses doesn't have a rescue. They have a fire department, but not a BLS rescue.
So I guess maybe I don't understand the premise of number 2. Municipalities pay per rescue. That's not each time they go out. That's
correct. So a rescue unit is the EMS portion of the fire department, and not all fire departments have that. So when they dispatch an ambulance, they also dispatch the fire department's rescue unit to the scene. So
to assist.
Correct. So the town of Ulysses doesn't have a rescue unit.
The goal of the rescue is to have an EMT or a paramedic, in our case, an EMT, get there well in advance of the transport unit to begin that life-saving care. But some fire services don't offer that as a service to your community.
So if they do have it, they'd have to pay in.
I'm not
That's
sure.
what you're saying?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sorry, to clarify, so is a rescue that a fire department might have similar to the rapid medical response we're proposing?
Yes.
In terms of, okay.
Yes. And some have rescue units and some don't. And that's why when we were trying to come up with different models, we were trying to look at, some where we're just looking at the townships as a whole, some that have, like Dryden, for example, has multiple fire departments and some have rescues in them. So, and some share like McLean. So it can get kind of complicated. And that's why it was a real challenge for us, because I don't really know if I have a great answer for it, frankly.
I guess I think I'm just like carrying Annie's question on. So it looks here like if you already have a rescue, then you're going to pay more for this service. But it would seem like if you already have a rescue, you would get less value from this service than if you don't. So what am I missing?
The thought premise behind that is those are the rescue services that we feel we are going to be supplementing the most, which is why we put that in as a model.
Okay, Greg Mezzi, Lee Shurtleff.
I can't help myself.
All right.
Can you go back to the slide, the map of the county, the heat map? Yeah, I think there's an answer here for Veronica on that and others. One back to the original showing the 4 ambulances.
I'll say this is the only map that I have.
The
Okay. The response. I gotcha. This one.
right there. I think this is one of the best illustrations. We started out, and Dan will remember the heat maps that we used when the EMS task force was going. But basically, you see the bold green, the bold yellow, the bold red, and the bold blue. That's where, coincidentally, where the 4 ambulance services in the county are located: Trumansburg, Groton, Dryden, and Bangs. And you can see that 90% roughly of the calls that those ambulances respond to are within a very short radius of where they're located. I would point out to you that the villages and towns that encompass Groton, Dryden, and Trumansburg have hired full-time paramedic help to keep those ambulances staffed on almost a 24-hour-a-day basis. Those municipalities have subsidized the EMS system heavily in those towns to ensure that there's a 5-minute response to 90% or more of their territory. Bangs as well, because of where they're situated, is able to handle the bulk of their population. So it really comes back to the other municipalities that they do fund their fire departments and their rescue squads to some degree, but they don't have the ambulance expense and the paramedic expense that the towns of Ulysses, Groton, Dryden, villages of Trumansburg, and Groton have invested into it. So I think that plays into some of the rationale that Joe and Michael have brought forward with the different scenarios.
Thank you, Lee. Next is Greg Muzzy.
Yeah, I picked up on something you said in your presentation, good customer service. I'm a hospitality guy by trade, so to hear that sort of mindset is great, because I think ultimately what this is about is not if the county pays or municipality pays, but the fact that our members in our community, right, who need us at the most vulnerable time many will experience probably in their life, are having to wait a really long time. And it's our job, and we're elected to serve them to the best of our capacity with the dollars that we're entrusted to. This is an absolute no-brainer for me that we get behind this. We figure out a way to fund this. I do believe there should be some cost sharing. I'll let the budget committee debate that at nausea, I'm sure. But I do think that this is a really good thing, and I'm glad you brought this. And I think it's really, really important that we keep who we're serving first and foremost. And if we can reduce the wait time, if we can save somebody's life, this $600,000 or $300,000 or $50,000 to a town seems like a no-brainer. So I really appreciate it, and I also appreciate the fact that you're not thinking about the bureaucracy or the credentials or all of those sort of things, but you're thinking about, at the end of the day, it's customer service. It's, the people that we're entrusted to provide for. So I really appreciate that, and definitely heard that loud and clear. So I'm all for this, and I hope the rest of my colleagues will be as well.
Okay, I just want to do a time check. It's 7:08, and I know that at some point soon we probably need to take a break. I have Deb Dawson, Randy Brown, and then Veronica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Michael and Joe and the steering committee. I agree, this is a no-brainer. This is something that we know our residents need. Everybody agrees that we have to provide this service. I think the problem's going to be is how we're going to pay for it. And I can't just say, I'm not worried about it. We'll take a leap of faith. That's fine. $500,000 a year, no problem. That's only 1% of our tax levy, people. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about that, many discussions. But I have a different question. When I was looking into the municipally funded ambulance services, I found that they are billing for services. That if that is an option that would be available to us, that would certainly help defray the costs and minimize the cost-sharing burden on the municipalities. Is that a possibility?
So right now, in New York State, we cannot bill for a first response vehicle. So the rapid medical response would be a non-billable service. We would have to be able to transport in order to bill.
That's depressing. Thank you.
Sorry.
Next is Randy Brown.
Yes, thank you for all the work in the presentation. Thanks for all the data, too. I really enjoy the data and what, all the information you guys are tracking. This is going to add more data and more process. Do you have the infrastructure in your current software and your system, other than hiring the people, to manage all the data?
Yes.
And the other part of that is there data that you've been looking at that offers some type of procedural solutions related to, whether people should be even a different process of an ambulance or something like that?
Absolutely. In fact, recently we were invited to participate in a conversation with CMC on a community paramedicine program that will be partnering with them to present to the EMS chiefs that are responsible for the transport agencies in the county. It's specific to the Visiting Nurses Association, and it's a pilot program. There's 2 other counties in the state that are currently doing it, but to your point, yes, I think there are plenty of opportunities to look at some alternative response models. And so that's just one. And, I think what's the 17th? It's in a week, yeah. So on the 17th. So we're excited about it. And what the goal of that program is to reduce the number of times that a client from the Visiting Nurses Association would have to go to the hospital if they don't have a true medical emergency. And we've been working on that with them now for several months. And again, they'll be approaching our EMS partners in the very near future to really sort of pitch that program. But that's one example. I think the other thing I'd like to really stress is that some of the other work that Joe has been doing over the last year is really building a bond and a relationship with our EMS community. We now have monthly EMS leadership meetings that typically in the past, EMS I felt was a little overshadowed by the fire service, and a lot of the meetings that they were part of were really part of, like, say, the Fire Chiefs Association. So in partnership and in an understanding and cooperation with the Fire Chiefs Association, we're now meeting with the EMS leaders separately, and those meetings have been fantastic. And that led to us bringing back into Tompkins County for the first time in many, many years an EMT program that's currently underway. And again, this is in partnership with CMC and Upstate, and this is something that Joe has worked on. And he's also working on quality assurance with regards to how are we doing when we're responding to these calls and we're charting. Something that most people don't realize is even these rescues are required to do a full comprehensive medical chart. And, sometimes you can really discover gaps in your treatment when you do those Q&A. And Joe is now spearheading a countywide initiative where we can do that together as an EMS community to then really see what we can do to help improve our response models. Thank you.
Veronica Pillar.
I think I said my thing earlier. I pass.
Okay. I'm just going to add one question, and was wondering if you could tell me what percentage of the time or how many situations are there where there are no first responders available in the city of Ithaca? How often does that happen?
I don't know if I have an answer for that. Because I think first responder, that's really police, fire, EMS, so
Right.
That's a broad question. But certainly if you were able to give me a more specific question, I might be able to research it and bring it back to you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the city of Ithaca were to opt in for this, how often would they use the service?
I don't anticipate them opting in simply because the fire service does provide this level of first response. So we're just not anticipating that. And to my knowledge, there really isn't necessarily a response time issue in the city, but not only between the fire services providing their version of rapid medical response or rescue or bangs.
Okay, thank you. Dan Klein.
Yeah, just one more quick question. I think I know the answer, but I think it might be good to say it out loud. Town of Ithaca is not listed on here. Is that because it's with the city in terms of fire
Yeah, there was a
protection?
little bit of confusion on that too, and I feel like I said during the meeting at Town of Caroline, like, if I don't know the answer, I don't know the answer. So we had a little bit of a misunderstanding. I was trying to get some clarity before the presentation, but that is one reason. So, but it's my understanding that the Ithaca Fire Department does provide that medical rapid response or rescue to the township. So we're going to clean this up for that reason, but that we just really discovered right before.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions tonight for this presentation? Okay, well, thank you for coming this evening.
May I just thank our community partners that joined us this evening. So Mark and Dan and EMS Director Ellen Woods. We have Chief Carr on the line tonight, but he's also the president of the Chiefs Association. And then our doer team that's here, Justin and Jessica as well. So just really appreciate everybody's involvement. So, and thank you all for the great questions. And I feel like I still owe you a better answer, so I want you to know I haven't forgotten that. And I also received an email from, obviously, Legislator Dawson today. I'm going to go through that email again, and if I don't feel like I answered the questions tonight, then I will provide answers for you. So I will get back to both of you, because I just feel like I haven't really necessarily hit it on the mark.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll see you in a few weeks. Next week. Okay, it is 7:15, and I know that we have a long presentation coming up. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we will reconvene at 7:25.
Hi, how are you?
You want to figure out a time?
It was so good to meet you in person.
Okay, welcome back. I hope everyone had a nice break. We are going to move over now to, oh, we're not live yet. Okay, we're live. Thank you, Rob. We are going to move over now to our report by the County Administrator, Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What about the Moody's?
We're going to do Lisa's report first. Thanks, Deb.
Okay.
So I just have a brief update. The first, I'd like to bring the appointment of Christopher Spahn as the Workforce Development Director to the Legislature for confirmation.
Thank you. Greg Mezzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to move to confirm the appointment of Christopher Spahn as the Director of Workforce Development.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Deborah Dawson.
So just for some background, Chris has served as the Deputy Director of Workforce Development Board since July of last year. He stepped into the Interim Director role in December of 2022. Since that time, Chris has engaged with the board, staff, and stakeholders to align training, education, and supportive services with the needs and career pathways of local employers. We conducted a search, and our search panel was made up of department heads, administrative staff, community partners from the Workforce Development Board Executive Committee, as well as legislator Greg Mezzi, chair of HED. And Chris was selected as our final candidate. His appointment is also dependent on the confirmation by the Workforce Development Board, and that body unanimously approved Chris's appointment at its meeting on September 26th. Chris's appointment will also usher in the restructuring of the Workforce Development Department, bringing the Workforce Development Board and Workforce New York Career Center under one umbrella. So it's my pleasure to make this, to bring this to you for confirmation.
And if there are any comments, we can enter into executive session as an option. Would anyone else like to comment? Okay. By the raise of your hand, please raise your hand if you would like to vote for the motion on the floor. That is unanimous. Welcome aboard, Christopher. Come up and say a few words if you'd like. Sure.
How much time do I have? I'll be quick. Well, first off, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very grateful for it. I actually just left the ICMA conference this morning, so I went from Austin to Chicago to Rochester, so I'm glad I made it in time for this appointment. I'm just really excited to work with everybody, collaborate as we start this new department. Ultimately, we all have to work together on this, so I really do look forward to communicating more with you about your needs and related to workforce. I look forward to working with our board, our partners, especially the Career Center staff. They're very enthusiastic and passionate about the work, so our values certainly align, so I'm very excited for what lies ahead with them. Ultimately, I'm just very excited to be here. I'm grateful. Mike, I can't change the weather, but I will do my best to make sure the youth stay here and we have the right workforce programs for them so they don't leave us.
That's all we ask.
Okay. I'm glad you agree. But yeah, thank you. Do you have any questions or we're good?
We're happy to have you. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And the only other update I have is on the 408 North Tioga Street property, also known as the Red House. We released a request for proposals from real estate brokers widely on September 22nd. We will be accepting proposals through October 20th, and then using a standard set of criteria to evaluate proposals from realtors to assist us in the sale of the Red House moving forward. So I'll be sure to keep the legislature and the F&I committee updated on that.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa Holmes? Okay, thanks, Lisa. Next, we're going to hop to Holly Mosier, who is tuning in via Zoom.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
I don't have any updates of note, but we're still plugging along in the office, and I think everything is going fine so far. So,
Great. Any questions for Holly Mosier? Okay, thank you, Holly. Keep plugging away.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, now for the main event, the moment you've all been waiting for. Director of Finance, Lori Scarrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any updates tonight, but I would like to welcome our guest speakers tonight. We have with us Andrew Watkins, who is with Fiscal Advisors, and they help us with all the financial aspects of issuing bonds and taking care of our annual reporting. And we also have Suzanne Sable from Moody's Investor Services, and she works on our bond ratings when we go out for bonds. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew from Fiscal Advisors.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us here today. We were really excited to be able to do this, and I'm very appreciative that Suzanne was willing to come down from Moody's, or virtually come down and present, because I think it can provide great insight into a legislature about and I won't steal from what Suzanne's going to say later tonight, but from what all goes into a bond rating and the input factors that pop out a bond rating that is important in the issuance of debt from a municipal standpoint. The county's bond rating is currently high. It's one notch, it's AA1, one notch below a AAA. And from a municipal advisor standpoint, where we're working with the county to achieve the best interest rate for any issuance. So inside any market, we're working to achieve the best rate we can. And a big piece of that, probably the most important piece of that, is to have that high bond rating. So to understand and to know what goes into that bond rating can help the county make decisions and work on its budget, work on its spending, work on its reserves in order to maintain that and therefore have the highest bond rating and spend the least interest cost over the life of any given bond. Myself, I've been working with the county for 7 years. Fiscal Advisors has been working with the county for 30 years. They've actually, I looked this afternoon or this morning, and there was an official statement of the county from 1992, and it was roughly 15 pages front to back. So our office is always tasked with preparing the official statement, and they've grown a little bit in time because of the regulations, because of the county operations growing, and now they're about 180 pages front to back. So it's gotten a little bit more complicated from an issuance standpoint, and we're grateful to work with Lori and her team and the county to be able to put their issuance together on a year-to-year basis. But I do want to turn it over to Suzanne now to let her speak and give her presentation. But if you do have any questions for me, I'll let you ask them after Suzanne goes, and I know she's going to open up to some questions as well. So Suzanne?
Thanks, everybody. 15-page OS, Andrew, that's just funny to think about. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I think will help kind of go through the methodology that we use for rating the bonds for the county. And then I want to touch on what we look at when we compare the county to, your peers, both within New York State and nationally. So I'm just going to get this started. Beginning. Okay. I can see you guys can see my screen, which is very helpful. I can see the projector. Great. So just jumping right in to the PowerPoint that I have here. So every time the county comes to market with a new bond issuance, I applied our brand new, which came out in November of 2022, our updated cities and counties methodology. This methodology has to apply to all U.S. cities and counties and by cities, I mean villages, towns, etc. With this new methodology, we have two different instruments that we apply, which the county actually already had. So that wasn't anything new in terms of the methodology. We have an issuer rated, which is based on the county's fundamental credit quality, which we'll go into detail about what that means. And then we go into more technical aspects, such as what the debt instrument is. In New York State, it's pretty much always a general obligation pledge, so there's nothing funky going on in terms of debt structures. That's not always the case nationally. But at a high level, our methodology goes through four main characteristics. These characteristics generally have been consistent across our methodologies, whether it's this one or previous methodologies. And when you think about what the methodology goes into detail about, it is very similar to what you all care about. You care about your economy, you care about your finances, you care about long-term liabilities and setting the county up for long-term success from that perspective. And that's what we look at also. So these are our four main characteristics. Within those, again, we'll go into detail about what the economy means from our perspective, what finances mean, et cetera. So starting with the economy, we are looking at three main characteristics here. We are looking at resident income and wealth, wealth being full value per capita. We also are looking at how the economy is growing in terms of gross domestic product, so your GDP growth in relation to the country. We want to see essentially, is the county's economic development growing at a similar pace to the nation, falling significantly behind, or significantly above? And so the highlighted circles here are where the county currently scores for these metrics. We're scoring we're scoring A in these metrics. But we'll go into detail as to why you shouldn't panic about these metrics overall for the credit profile. The next section we take a look at is the county's financial performance. So our metrics are going to be coming from your annual audited financial statements, but I always do take a look at the county's budgets, any long-term financial plans that might be available also. I like to look at all information available if it's, applicable. And so in terms of finances, I would say this is a strength for the county. We are looking at AAA finances. I've worked with the county and I was your analyst for several years. Rick Snyder did a fantastic job, over the past couple of years, and I'm excited to work with Lori going forward. And in terms of finances, I do think the county, this is definitely a strength. And not just the actual numbers, we always like to take a look at, does your budget go to plan? Are there big deviations year to year? I like stability. I like a boring grading call. I don't like surprises typically. And I don't usually get that from the county. So from a credit perspective, that's something we definitely look at, even if it might not show up in the numbers exactly. The next factor, this one's a little bit out of your control. Institutional framework. It's essentially the county's ability to increase revenues and cut expenditures based on New York State law. So every county in New York actually gets the same score. It's AA. We view your ability to raise revenues fairly easily, but we do have unions and other things that can cause expenditure constraints. But overall, we think, for New York counties, everything is at a AA level. The last one, our last main characteristic here is leverage. We are including the county's debt burden, adjusted pension liabilities, which I can go into detail about also, and adjusted OPEB liabilities, all in relation to revenues. And then same with fixed costs, your annual debt service, your annual pension, your annual OPEB contributions. This metric, I think the county is actually scoring quite well on these, especially in New York. We do typically see higher OPEB liabilities, which drive up that long-term liabilities ratio. The county isn't as exposed as some of your peers within the state. So from our perspective, it is a positive. We also understand a lot of the lack of pension pressures is out of your control. And New York State does have a well-funded pension plan from our perspective, but we do understand it's a bit out of your control, essentially. And then from a debt perspective, again, I think being the analyst for several years, the county does do a good job of managing its debt burden, staying within your means and within what we typically expect from a AA1 county. So at a high level, that is our methodology and what we take a look at. This, and I will say, our scorecard and these scorecard breakpoints really are a starting point for our analysis. There are a lot of things that go into a rating committee decision that are aside from the method, or aside from the scorecard. For example, if I go back to the economy section here, we all know Tompkins County has really strong institutional presence. You have Cornell, you have Ithaca College. You may not know that just looking at the numbers, but as your analyst, my job is to tie the numbers to a narrative and explain why the economy might be scoring an A on the scorecard based on the breakpoints, but is actually quite strong when you consider a lot of the qualitative aspects of the county. So again, you might panic if you see A's for the scores. There's a lot that goes into the discussion behind the scenes. So that is the methodology at a high level. And again, here are other considerations like I was just mentioning. There's a lot of things that we can look at above and beyond just the numbers. Now, with the rating committee discussion as well, we always like with the scorecard, we stick to our methodology, but we do like to compare you to your peers. So I thought it might be helpful to also look at how Tompkins County metrics stand up to New York County AA medians, and then similarly with national AA and AAA medians also. So from, just looking at a high level, we typically see, as you go up in the rating categories, stronger resident income, stronger full value per capita, a bit more growth in the economy. But again, some of those, especially the resident wealth and income, can be a bit skewed, by the student population. So again, I'm not saying, just because you don't have a, 100% MHI or 123% MHI for AAA, there's reasons for that, right? But from a financial perspective, as you can see, the county is in really strong position compared to your peers. And I'd say that also similarly with leverage. We are seeing lower leverage metrics in comparison to your national peers and especially New York County peers. And that's all I have. I'm really happy to answer questions, to go through anything you guys want to pick my brain about. I know you're coming up on budget season and kind of taking these into consideration, but that's what we look at a high level from the rating perspective when we take a look at the county's rating on an annual basis.
Great. Thank you so much for attending our meeting. I have to say this is the first time I've ever had a full lesson and people that are able to answer questions about our rating. And so we appreciate you being here. Are there any questions tonight? Deborah, Rich, and Randy.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne and Andrew. It would be really great if we could get your PowerPoint slides as a start. Would that be all right? Could you send them to Lori and...
I will have to ask one of my many compliance department members. So let me follow up with them and see. Don't hate me if they say no. But I will also say our methodology is publicly available. I'm more than happy to send that as well. Okay. And I believe I can also send over, I have the medians in that PowerPoint. We do an annual publication for medians that we can share as well.
Thank you. So I guess I'll just dive right into what always seems to be a major fixation for myself and my colleagues, and that is fund balance and the importance of fund balance in maintaining our credit rating. And I guess one of the things that we've tried to do, and Lori has worked closely with our administration people, is actually slice and dice everything that constitutes our fund balance, the reserves and the allocations and the unallocated and the capital. And one question everyone has is, do all of those things count as fund balance for the purpose of the ratio that Moody's uses?
Great question, one that I get very frequently also. So with this methodology, we are including, basically if it's in your audit, we are including it in some shape or form. When it comes to fund balance, we in all the financial metrics, we try to be very literal between the audit and our metrics. We find that it really helps to be able to trace back the numbers. So with that being said, if it's in the audit and governmental funds, business type activity funds, for fund balance specifically, as long as it is unassigned, assigned, committed, basically anything that is not restricted, we are including in our, what we call the available fund balance. So that 47% that I was mentioning. Similarly with cash across all funds. So that will also include the airport activities, pretty much everything. If it's listed as restricted, it's not like I ignore it. I know it's there. I will sometimes clarify during rating calls, is this actually restricted? Is there external government restrictions? Or is this just classified as restricted because the auditor was a bit conservative? We do see that in some instances, but that's essentially it. Anything not restricted, we're including in fund balance.
So if we create a reserve for a specific purpose, is that restricted within your nomenclature?
It would come down to how the auditor classifies it. So if I pull up, I have the county's audit handy dandy. So right, there's about, based on the fiscal 22 audit that just came out, the 2.3 million in restricted fund balance in the general fund specifically, we would not be including that, even if it is fungible, even if the county council can move that those funds however they like. If the auditor has classified it as restricted, we are treating it restricted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Rich John?
Thank you so much for coming and giving us this presentation. It's really helpful. I'm curious if Moody's has any undertaking for consideration of university communities, university and college communities, where you really get this skewed version of resident income. It seems to put us in the position that to maintain our bond rating, we have to be really, really careful with our financial performance and our fund balance and everything else that other communities probably don't struggle with quite as much as we do.
Yeah, it's a tough one, to be honest with you. And you're not alone. There are plenty of places nationally with large universities that have the same exact problem as the county does. I will say again, that's the reason I'm here, is to sort of balance that between, you might have a score based on the actual numbers. Students are very much a skewing factor, especially when it is a significant presence like Cornell and Ithaca College also. So we don't have, I would say, a formal adjustment for that. We do want to rely solely on census data because that's the most consistent. We want to treat everyone as consistently as possible. But again, that's the point of me, and you might not, if we just went off our scorecard, nobody would be very happy. It's really our job to translate between, the numbers and where we are from an actual economic standpoint.
Thank you.
Randy Brown?
Yes, thank you for all the information. It's good to learn all this. In one slide, you talked about leverage. Is that the bonds that we approve? Is that what leverage is?
It would be any outstanding bonds and bond anticipation notes the county has outstanding at year end.
Okay. I saw our county was lower. Is there a number where it gets to a point where it would change our rating?
So that's a tough question. It really is dependent. It's not, you issued another 100 million, for example, and it was an automatic downgrade. That doesn't happen. We have a long discussion as to why the debt's being issued, how it's being issued, the structure of it, how it fits in with your fixed costs on an annual basis. Is it affordable? There are a lot of questions that go into the overall leverage figure. And it's not just you hit a number and boom, downgraded. There is a lot of deliberation that goes into it. I will say, I have seen situations where we have a formal capital plan. This was a planned issuance of, several $100 million. Leverage does go up. Some instances, nothing happens. Some instances, it is actually unbearable, and we do decide to downgrade a municipality. So it really does depend on the situation in general.
Thank you.
Greg Mezzi.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. A quick question, and this may be for Lori or I don't know who might answer this. So our reserves, would our auditors classify those as restricted funds as we set up our policy?
I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe those are in the restricted, yes.
Okay, so that set aside 12 million in our new reserve policy are considered restricted funds. So in terms of the way that Moody's looks at it, for available unrestricted fund balance, that would not be a consideration.
Based on what Suzanne was saying, is she would not include that in her analysis of what's included in unassigned fund balance.
Okay.
Is that correct, Suzanne?
Yes. Again, it comes back to how the auditor is classifying it. So from a formal metrics perspective, anything restricted is not available fund balance. From an analytical standpoint, I know there's money there. If I'm aware that it is fungible and the auditor's just being, conservative, there is some consideration from that. But from a scorecard input, from a median's perspective, they would not be included. So this comes to the auditor and how you guys want to classify it. I cannot provide recommendations on that.
So I guess my question then is, did we do the right thing? Because, well, no, I mean, again, a lot of this conversation was around the Moody's rating and needing to have more money set aside. One of the things that some of us had asked for is understanding what those funds may be already allocated towards, or maybe less restrictive buckets, but, kind of earmarking funds in a certain way. Again, I don't know the right way to financially do that as a municipality. But I guess I would just kind of ask that question, because if it's not counting towards the rating, which I think was a big impetus for a lot of us to support that moving forward, and also the long-term financial health of the county. Again, it's not just about the Moody's rating, but are restricted funds, the way that we set up our policy, is that the right policy? And should we take another look at that based on the information we hear today?
I will say that we do take the notes of the audit literally. So the definition for restricted fund balance based on the notes is, consists of legally purposed restrictions imposed by creditors, guarantors, contributors, laws, other governments, externally enforced. So that's the real driver why we don't include restricted. We think it's an externally restricted amount. So we do take that literally from our perspective, if that helps.
And I guess based on what we heard Lori say, that those in our budget committee, last budget meeting, that those are restricted, and that those, once they're set aside in a restricted fund for that use and purpose, that those funds cannot be used unless it's a real act of, I don't know what, but they're restricted for that use only. Okay.
Does it make a difference that that's an internal restriction that we put on ourselves? I mean, once we say, we're going to use X dollars for this purpose, the state says, well, you've reserved that, so you have to use it for that purpose. I think it's kind of I guess that's where Suzanne's statement that, on the one hand, yeah, it doesn't count, but on the other hand, she considers that it's there.
Sure. But my concern, and the only reason I bring it up, is in the next bond rating or in a future bond rating.
No, I understand.
Right? If we were to have other financial implications, or there'd be other things to say, hey, you have restricted funds, and then now we've got to come back and have a conversation that we need even bigger of a fund balance that's unrestricted because we made a decision at some point to restrict these funds.
I guess that's a debate we need to have, but
Deborah?
Yeah, I think, one of the reasons that we did that was because we all had a massive misunderstanding about what it meant to have X dollars overall in fund balance. And it was necessary for us to break it down and say, okay, we need this much for purpose A, and we went through our list, and then we realized that our, what was it, $70 million is really $6 million, $6.5 million. If we were disciplined enough as a group to not need to reserve those funds and recall that we still needed to keep them aside for a specific purpose, then I guess we wouldn't need a reserve policy, but that's a conversation we need to have.
I didn't have a massive misunderstanding.
Some of us did. Yeah, and I just wanted to bring up one other point. Apropos of Randy's question, the leverage issue doesn't just include what we've borrowed, it includes what the state imposes on us as like a reserve for OPEB expenses, isn't that correct?
In terms of leverage, you mean?
Yeah.
Our specific, so no, that would be, if you have a reserve for OPEB, is that?
No, but we have I guess reserve's the wrong word. We're deemed to have a liability for OPEB expenses that we really don't have any control over. The state tells us what that looks like, isn't that correct?
Right, the pension and OPEB liability that we take a look at in the financial statements, yeah, it's out of your control. The state tells you what to pay, you pay it every year, your hands are tied. And as rating analysts, especially, covering New York State, I understand that. We have counties, in Illinois, for example, where they're in charge of their own pension plan. There's no state, there is a state plan, but a lot of places have their own pension plan. And in that situation, they can make changes, or lack thereof, and they get into pension pressures and OPEB pressures. That's not the case in New York State, but we do consider pensions and OPEB to be a liability for the county. So that's why it's in the metrics, yeah. But it is out of your control.
Randy Brown.
Yes, I think that, we talked about the reserves. We haven't voted on those, correct? Right. So it's still part of the discussion. I went through the audit report again today for about an hour, and I got lost in it. I mean, because there's numerous pages of numerous spreadsheets with different names for different things, and unallocated or unassigned, I got lost in that. So I think that your presentation in August was very helpful for me. And I think that we need to use the same terminology that the audit report is using, because I didn't see some of the terminology that you shared with us in that report. So I think that if we get apples and apples, it will have much better understanding of what we truly have. So I appreciate that. So.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Veronica Biller had raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you. Susanna, you might have said this, but ultimately who decides our bond rating? Like, is it you specifically for our county?
That would make my life a whole lot easier. No, I'm kidding. It's we have a rating committee. It's a group of senior analysts who understand New York State, who understand credit nationally. We want to make sure credit is consistent across the country. We hold a rating committee and it's determined by majority vote. So it's not just me. My job is to present all of the information with a clear picture to the rating committee. We have, rating calls to go over, behind the numbers, what's going on. I take all of the information between the budgets, audits, any presentations I have, our discussions over rating calls, present that to the rating committee, and we have a majority decision at that point. So not just me. So if I'm in a bad mood, it won't be me downgrading you. It's a committee decision overall.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. I guess we worry about bond rating changes all the time, or maybe would hope for them if our bond rating were lower. But I guess in your experience, how dynamic are bond ratings? Like, how much do you see them change for counties anywhere, say?
Sure. And, the past couple of years have been a challenge. I think COVID has kind of shown where we see strengths in local governments and where, there might be some pitfalls with local governments. But overall, we Our goal is to not have a lot of rating changes. We want to have a long-term consistent credit quality for a municipality. We are no help to the market essentially if we're just upgrading and downgrading every year. We really take rating changes very seriously. There has to be a sustained change, neither a positive or negative direction. And so 1 year fluctuations year to year, not necessarily, not saying always, but not necessarily leading to a downgrade. But if we see a sustained trend in any of the rating categories that I've talked about tonight, that could potentially lead to either positive or negative pressure. When I have rating calls, and I try to do this with the county, I do try to provide that forward look of what the rating committee is going to be looking at, what I'm looking at. And if I see pressure points, we try to make sure everyone is well prepared. I don't like going into things unprepared. I want to make sure everyone is comfortable. And so, I definitely try to do that with my rating discussions. We also, in our reports that we publish on Moody's.com, do always list what can make the rating go up and what can make the rating go down. So the county has a sense of, if we see a sustained drawn fund balance from our metrics, which I know are a little jargony, but from our perspective, if fund balance drops, that could be a reason for a downgrade. Again, everything is in context, but we always put those in our reports also.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne and Andrew. We really appreciate your time tonight. You've really been able to help us continue to debate these topics for hours and hours on end. So we appreciate your clarity.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on in our agenda. Are there any resolutions that needed to be added and or withdrawn from the agenda? Mike Lane?
As Chair of F&I, I've been requested to withdraw Resolution B, recommendation for appointment to the Tompkins County Consolidated Area Transit Board of Directors. That's ID 11939.
Thank you. And we will move on to the consent agenda. Resolutions and appointments to be voted on as a group unless any member of the legislature requires that a resolution or appointment be instead separately and individually as part of the business of standing or special committees. And let's see here, Travis is not here, so we will do a roll call, or we will do a vote via hands. Advisory Board appointment, ID 11901, Criminal Justice Alternatives to Incarceration Board, Jeremy Cranmer, Mediation Services Representative, term expires December 31st, 2025. Health and Human Services Committee, budget Resolution A, budget adjustment, supplemental ELC COVID-19 funding, Whole Health 4016, ID 11915. Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Resolution C, recommendation for appointment to Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit Board of Directors, ID 11938.
Just for clarity, you're moving Resolution C as the revised one in our red packet?
We should pull it from there.
Yes,
If we could pull it from consent, please. If someone can pull it from consent. Thank you, Greg.
So we're just voting on Resolution A and the Advisory Board appointments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a mover for consent, please? Moved by Greg, seconded by Ann Corman. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you all. Next, we are going to move on to standing and special committees. Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
Thank you. The Public Safety Committee met Thursday, September 21st, and we had a fairly lengthy discussion about EMS service, as we did this evening. But one other item I just wanted to mention was the Sheriff's Office has achieved accreditation in the jail, and this is a big deal. This means that a national organization has reviewed all of the policies and procedures, the practices, the personnel, the training, the equipment, and deemed our jail operation within the requirements for accreditation. It's a big undertaking, and he got it done. So I think that deserves mention. And I'd also mention our jail, we currently have 62 people with 2 board outs. Other than that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Rich John? Mike Lane?
I'd like to make a motion that we, as from the legislature, send a letter of congratulations to the Corrections Department under the sheriff for achieving this pretty important
I would second that.
accreditation.
Okay. All those in favor for us to send a letter of appreciation, please raise your hand.
Point of order. I wonder if it would be appropriate to ask for debate before the vote.
Sure.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, we could do that. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Why don't we can have comment? Deb Dawson?
I just have a quick question. What's the accrediting organization? I missed.
I don't recall who the national accreditor is, but it's an organization that accredits law enforcement organizations. And I believe he's also working on it on the road patrol side.
Okay, so this is an accreditation for the corrections officers?
side.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Veronica Pillar?
I guess just, I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but just for context, is sending letters from the legislature to congratulating departments a thing that is done typically?
Yeah, we've done that before. Sometimes it's from the chair. Sometimes it's to individuals who are recognized in our community. So it's up to this body. Greg Mezzi?
I have no issue supporting this. I personally think these are things that we should be doing more of as a body, publicly recognizing the work of our staff that they continue to do. Obviously, I don't know what this accreditation entails, but anytime you can get an outside body to say, hey, well done, like we got great ratings, like we should be well done to the finance department. You know, we should celebrate the corrections folks for their hard work.
And we'll make sure that it's a draft. The clerk's office can draft something up for us and make sure to have the details correct in the association and really point out the achievements of this award. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. All those that are against, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 12-1. Thank you. Okay, anything else, Rich?
No.
Health and Human Services Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 16th, and we have 2 presentations. One is a short one from our County Office for the Aging. We have 2 staff in that department who have recently been certified in some kind of certification for aging in place. And our office now offers this as a service to county residents to do some consulting with individual households to give them some ideas of how they can better stay in their homes. So that'll be one presentation. The other presentation or subject is about the New York State Medical Aid in Dying Act. This is a proposed law, a bill in the New York State Legislature. It is endorsed, or what's the word? Sponsored? No. Both our state representatives have signed on to this bill. What's that word? Okay. Sponsored? All right. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. And this is a law that exists in 10 other states in one form or another. And so we are going to have a little information about what this proposed law looks like in New York and have a discussion about it. That's my report.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions or comments for Dan Klein? Randy Brown?
Yes, I got a call from a constituent that had they have a disabled son, and they were in Tompkins County, and he was in a group home. And they were informed by the state that they were closing the group home. And so Harmony looked into it. And it turns out the state has closed quite a few, and 50 beds in Tompkins County over the last few years. And the reason that Tompkins County wasn't aware of it is because they don't close them, they suspend them. So if they suspend them, they're not required by law to notify the health department that they are suspending them. So this, unfortunately, this person who's been in this local home for 20 years, his parents are now up in age, and they bring home their son every weekend. Well, now they're moving the son to Johnson City because there aren't any homes locally, and there's no plan, and it's staffing is the main issue. They're saying that they're being closed. So Harmony did look, and I just wanted to share that with you, and I don't know what the county can do, if anything, but I just wanted to make people aware of that.
I think Mike Sigler had a situation as well. Oh.
I talked to the state about that, and it wasn't really much a state issue as it was. It wasn't so much a state issue as it was a staffing issue, and that's why they're consolidating these. But yeah, it's very impactful. I mean, the person in my district, 15 years they've lived there, and it's one of only 2 homes left in the county. So now the county will have 1 group home left when we used to have 5. So.
Any other questions for Dan Klein? Okay, thank you, Dan. Next is Housing and Economic Development Committee. Greg Mezzi, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next meeting will be tomorrow, October 4th, Wednesday, at 3 p.m. Unfortunately, myself and Travis Brooks, the Vice Chair, are unable to attend that meeting, so the Honorable Ann Corman is going to be filling in as Chair. On the agenda, we have a recommendation by Tammy Baker, our Homeless Services Coordinator, regarding the Home Together Tompkins Plan, which her full recommendation and memo is in the HED agenda. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that. Just to give a spoiler, it is the recommendation that the Tompkins County Legislature accept the Continuum of Care plan, Home Together Tompkins Plan. But full adoption is complicated, and there's some nuance. And a lot of the nuances, I expect what will be discussed in the committee. The plan is that this will be presented tomorrow at the committee as an introduction. And then if it's the sense of the committee that we want to accept or move that plan to the full legislature for acceptance, that we would take some sort of committee action at the November meeting. But there's no action anticipated in October. We also have a number of our tourism advancement grants, community celebration, and tourism capital grants on the agenda as well. Other than that, business as usual. If anybody has any questions.
Great, thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg Mezzi? Ann Corman?
You won't be here to, no, just kidding.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Next, we have Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
Yes, we met on September 21st. Talked about the sale of the Red House, and you've had an update from our county administrator, how that's progressing. We had quite a bit of discussion about, what we have a recommendation from our planning department. We had some discussion about that recommendation. We did the handoff of the center of government process to the new committee formed by Chair Black, which is the Downtown Facilities Committee, which Randy Brown is going to be chairing. We talked about the need, now that we have a 4th member of our staff here at the county legislature, for additional office space. And what we approved after a presentation from Katrina McCloy was a temporary structure in the back corner of the property, of the legislature chambers. It's like a, not too tall, but it's glass and and metal. And it apparently is open enough so it won't block the ventilation issues there, but it'll give some privacy to the fourth legislature clerk. I raised the question of whether we could put something downstairs in the planning department. We're always told that there isn't any room down there, and now that they've moved the transportation planners over there, there's even less room. So they didn't feel that that would be sufficient to do that. We talked a little bit about the public safety building project, and that'll be we'll be looking at that more next month. And the dental building is no more. That day of the 21st of September started the deconstruction of that building, which we'd been waiting for I think over a year, or nearly a year. And Veronica just told me tonight that she walked by it and that it's a hole in the ground at this point. So the deconstruction continues as they continue to pull, I guess, metal and other things out of the site. So one down.
Thank you, Mike. Ann Corman?
Yeah, thanks. I talked with Arel Morrow today, and he said the contractors deconstructing that building, the old dental building, really did a great job, and it took a little bit longer than maybe he thought it might, but the detail that they took separating the different materials as it was being deconstructed of the reusable materials, and plus grinding up the concrete that could be used to start to work on the site and fill up the old basement. He thought was pretty, he was very impressed to see the level of detail that they did on that job.
Thank you, Ann. Deborah Dawson?
Do we know what that cost?
$250?
Yes.
We can find that out.
It's not that crucial. I just thought somebody might know off the top of their head. I'm sorry? Okay.
It was a little more expensive, I can't tell you the figure.
Just knocking it
but
down, yeah.
than just demolishing it.
Right.
Randy Brown?
Yeah, I'd just like to talk about the structure they're talking about putting up over in this corner here. I'm the only one that voted against that because I didn't like the idea of taking away space for the public over here. Not that I didn't want an office for somebody. But I just, and Arel wasn't here, unfortunately, to talk about that. And I'm some reason it doesn't feel right, so I don't know the solution. I did talk to Karina about that a little bit. We could put a desk right here, right? Yeah. So I'm just
you have
thinking
TV
that maybe
screens going
I
in
just
there.
didn't like the idea, so I just wanted to share that, so.
Katrina was going to pipe in a little bit.
I have talked to Arel, and we're going to come back to F&I with another option at the next meeting. So after the meeting, after there were some discussions of some different areas and stuff. So I'm just gathering some information. So at the next F&I meeting, we'll come back and discuss some other options.
Are we going to go vertical on the building?
Possibly, we could try that.
There's the bell tower.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, you have one resolution that was pulled.
Right. Because there's a revised version in your folders, this is the recommendation for appointment to the Tompkins County Consolidated Area Transit Board of Directors. It's Resolution C11938, and it simply adds the fact that this appointment is to fill the vacancy created when Lisa Holmes stepped down.
Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Deborah Dawson. And any questions or comments? I just want to thank Lisa for serving on that board for 2 years. For 2 years. I know that we're struggling with TCAT right now, but your efforts are definitely recognized, so thank you. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And those against? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you to Shauna for going on.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions for Mike Lane? Okay, thanks, Mike. Next, we have Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair.
Great, thank you. We are meeting on Thursday. We normally meet at 10, but we are meeting at 9. Just making sure committee members know that. We're meeting at 9. Please be there at 9. We are going to talk about a couple different things. The Public Library Advisory Board bylaws we're going to go over. Dominic's going to talk to us a bit about our designation of newspaper, which is always a fun conversation this time of year. This is just going to be a conversation. We're not voting on anything yet. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Robert's Rules of Order. And the sections I pulled out this time are about debate and how to debate. So it'll be interesting. And that's all I got, I think.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Amanda? Okay, thanks, Amanda. Next is Planning, Energy, and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
It's a mouthful.
It really is. Yep.
Put me early on the agenda then. We have not met since our last legislature meeting. We will be meeting again on Monday, October 16th at 10 a.m. We don't have, I don't have the agenda yet, but one of the things that we're going to start putting, at least for a couple of our meetings, will be a topic at the beginning to discuss Skip the Stuff initiative that we're working on. And just as a reminder, that's all the utensils and other condiments and other things you get when you get to-go food. So we're looking at passing a local law that restaurants and other food establishments would have to ask you if you want something. So we'll be working on that. And I don't have utensils, but Greg is saving up some to bring in for another time to show us for show and tell. But I wanted to show this, some of my, as far as packaging. This is my allergy medicine that I take this time of year. And so it's quite a lot of plastic packaging. And then when you get through it, you might think this is paper, but no, they've made even the directions out of plastic. And because this is different materials put together, you can't recycle that, and you can't. It has like almost like a recycling thing on here to kind of make you think. But anyway, you can't recycle any of that. So today, I was able to find some other packaging from a generic one, so I hope it works as good. I'll start taking it tomorrow. That's just in a cardboard box with paper directions. Still have this issue, but that'll at least limit the amount of packaging I have for one of the products that I use. And that's all I have.
So Annie, I just want to say thank you for providing us with a prompt this evening. Those are some of my favorite meetings whenever we have some diagrams and dioramas and prompts.
You're welcome, and I'll save this for you to
some
to bring home.
Flonase. I already have that.
You might be
Thank
able to make a diorama with that plastic.
Maybe so. At the Science Center. Yep.
Thank you for that, the suggestion, Deborah.
Yep.
Welcome.
Is there comments for Ann Corman? And Mike Lane has just been given some hot off the press information that he might want to share with us now.
I'd be more than happy to. I'm just trying to read it here. This is for immediate release from the Ithaca Tompkins International Airport. Dated today, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport is excited to announce the receipt of a small community air service development grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation for the fiscal year 2022. This prestigious grant, totaling $750,000, serves as an endorsement of ITH's, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport's commitment to expanding air service options and bolstering connectivity for the community. The primary objective of the grant is to encourage an airline to introduce a new direct flight connecting Ithaca with Washington, D.C., creating greater accessibility for travelers in the region. The grant underscores the airport's relentless dedication to meeting the evolving travel needs of our residents and visitors alike. I don't know how much more you want me to go on.
I think that's wonderful news. That's
all right. So,
yay.
I think
Buy an airline? What?
what it's going to do is try to persuade an airline, and we don't know which one yet, to begin that service, and that'll be something that's got to be negotiated. But we want to certainly thank Senator Gillibrand for being part of this.
And Senator Schumer also had a big role.
Senator Schumer, okay.
Are you going to send a letter?
Yes, both of them.
And Congressman Molinaro also had a role in that. He's on the Transportation Committee.
Well, we thank all our congressional representatives.
Ooh. Wow. Okay, well, that's great news. You guys are getting chippy tonight. It's 8:30. Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you. So everything is going very smoothly. Contracts continue to get signed. There's two really small contracts that have not yet been signed, and the total dollar amount of those two contracts is only $14,500. So literally 99.8% of the funds that we set aside have been contracted for already. So things are moving along well. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 6th. We may or may not meet that day. We may or may not have to, but please still continue to keep that on your calendar. And that is my report.
Any questions for Dan Klein? Deborah Dawson?
So what's the status of the CMC?
Yeah. That contract has been signed. So the question was about the $1.5 million that we set aside for Cayuga Health System for a crisis intervention center. And the answer is that that contract's been signed. Yeah.
So they've got the green light and that's going forward?
The contract has been signed, meaning they've met all our requirements, all the contracting requirements. Yeah. I'm not trying to be evasive. I mean, that's what it means.
That's all you know. Okay.
Yeah.
Two representatives from CMC came to the Criminal Justice Alternatives to Incarceration Advisory Board last week to talk about this, and they are in the process of dealing with New York State, and they think they're getting through those things. I don't believe they have a timetable when, but they're making progress.
Yeah, and I could just add, as I reported last time, they told us when they came to our committee meeting that they had gone for one classification and from the state and had been denied. They went for a second classification and were denied, and they were exploring more options. So they don't, it sounds like they don't know exactly what they're going to do yet. They certainly haven't told us, but they're progressing. They want it to happen. They're trying to make it happen.
Okay, Mike Lane?
Dan, I just wondered, the fees to our consultants, are we still okay there? Are we still have the money to do that we'd planned to? They aren't charging us more money or anything?
That's right. We had already allocated that quite a while ago, and there's been no change in that, and I don't believe there will be. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Dan Klein? Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Next up is Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee. Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the ordinary course, we would be having our October meeting next Monday, but since that is Indigenous Peoples Day, we have rescheduled our meeting to October 18th, and since it's pretty far down the road, I don't necessarily know what's on the agenda, but it will be riveting. I also have a resolution. Resolution D, adoption of local law number D of 2023, a local law overriding tax levy limit for 2024 ID 11933, and I move that.
Seconded by Mike Lane. I would also like to add that this will need 9 votes in order to pass. Any explanation, Deborah?
Oh.
Any comments?
I mean, I think we all know why we might need to do this. It's a grim year, people. It's a grim year.
Lee Shurtleff?
Same philosophy as previous. I'm not opposed to voting to increase the tax rate over the property tax cap. It's a timing issue for me. I won't be supporting this.
Okay. Greg Mezzi?
Yeah, I think it's important to remind folks that this just gives us the option should we need to. We did it last year and we kept the increase to the levy flat. So this is a procedural vote that needs to be done so that in the event that we have to get there, our hands aren't tied before we have to act on the budget. So I just think that's important to stress every year that this is just a tool in the tool belt, but doesn't mean we're going to pull it out.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Oh, I'm going to have to actually count, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'm 10. Okay, all those against, please raise your hand. Okay, 10-3, that passes. Thank you all. Anything else for you, Deb?
No, ma'am.
Any questions or comments for Deb Dawson? Ann Corman?
Yeah, I had one since we're meeting next week to start to do the budget voting. I was discussing with someone regarding, how we would go through the process, and I know it was mentioned a couple of different ways at the last expanded budget meeting. And so one idea that came up was, since we could wait till the very last minute to keep adding amendments to it. And also, since some departments might, depending on which way we do it, some departments might have to might necessitate them coming several different times. Just putting this idea out there, if we could kind of follow, so they know when their stuff is going to come, that we could kind of follow something similar or even the same way that we did it before and use that same schedule so departments come through. So I was just bringing that up.
Well,
discussion.
somebody did mention, I think it was Norma, mentioned that she thought we ought to put all of the legislative amendments for each department together. So I guess that would generate some sort of a schedule. And once we have that list, we can advise department staff when their department's legislative amendments would be considered. Yeah. I just got the nod from the boss, so that's probably okay.
So it'll be by department. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions while we're on this topic about amendments and how to submit and how to add your name if you want to be added to an amendment? Questions about when we're going to get spreadsheets updated, how to look at the budget online? Okay, Dan Klein, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could just mention something about the budget forum for the sake of the audience, for anyone that's listening.
Oh, yes, we are having a budget forum on Thursday evening. Is that at 7?
Yes.
Yes. And it will be, I guess, we'll be here, and people can attend in person or by Zoom. Thanks for reminding me, Dan.
You're welcome. And isn't it true that this is really the prime time that the public gets to ask questions, make comments about the budget before we vote? This is about it, right?
That is the case. There is, of course, a public hearing, but that's after we've done probably 95% of the work on our budget. At the last minute, there's always the standard proposals to avoid increasing the tax levy. But what we're funding is pretty much decided by the time we have the public hearing.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next up is Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Veronica Pillar, Chair.
Thank you. Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee has not met since our last meeting. We will be meeting on October 25th. That's a Wednesday at 3 p.m. Agenda isn't set, but it will almost be by next meeting, so I'll tell you about it next time.
Okay, any questions for Veronica Pillar? or comments? Okay.
Sorry, I forgot to say this is the first meeting that Charlene Holmes, our new Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, will be with us.
Okay. Mike Lane?
Have you been getting nominations for the McBean Claiborne Award?
We have been and would still love more.
Thank you.
Okay. Any individual member-filed resolutions? I see none. Let's vote on the minutes of our previous meeting, September 19th, 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Rich John, seconded by Veronica Pillar. Any corrections, comments, changes? I see none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you all. And let me get my, we do have executive session this evening. Enter into executive session in accordance with Article 7, Section 105 of the Public Officers Law for the discussion of collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation, and their proposed acquisitions, sale or lease of real property of the proposed acquisition or securities, or sale or exchange of securities held by such public body, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Deborah Dawson, seconded by Greg Mezzi. And all those in favor to enter into executive session? Greg and Annie, would you like to vote on executive session? Thank you. That is unanimous, and we will not be taking action upon exiting executive session. It's 8:36. Why don't we meet back here at 8:45?